All right, everybody, let's talk about stealing, specifically stealing characters. But before we do that, let's do a quick reminder of what these terms mean. Static versus dynamic. If a character is static, they stay the same fundamentally, internally, personality-wise from the beginning of the story to the end of the story. Dynamic characters are different in somehow. They fundamentally change their outlook, their personality, how they think about the world, or something like that. We also have simple versus complex. Simple characters are very flat. We don't know much about them in that particular text. Whereas complex characters, we see a range of emotions, strengths, weaknesses, and we get to really know all sides of that character. Please keep in mind that emotional changes are not static or dynamic. That just shows that a character is simple or complex if we see the range of emotions. So let's just make sure we have that clear. But how do we figure out if a character is static or dynamic, simple or complex? Now, honestly, you guys have already been doing this. So you've just been kind of doing it naturally. So we're going to just give you some language to use to understand how we find it. First, we have direct characterization. This is that explicit where the author, you can sit there and say, hey, the author right here says they have blonde hair, blue eyes. That's what they look like. Or when the author says, they were very nice. Direct characterization. Versus indirect characterization, that implicit information, when the author is telling us stuff and our brains are working going, oh, look at that really nice thing that they did. What a kind person. We're implicitly figuring this out, or rather, we're inferring based on what's being told to us, this characterization. So where do we look exactly for this implicit information and implicit indirect characterization? We steal it. Okay, steal is clearly an acronym, and each letter is going to stand for something, which you can see right here on the screen. We're not talking about stealing illegally, but hopefully that makes it stick in your brain. So the implicit information comes from S, their speech, which is how they say things and what they say. T, their thoughts, or what they seem to be thinking if you can't actually read their thoughts. E, their effect on others. How do other people react to them? Does it match what the character's thinking about themselves? A, their actions, the things they actually do, or their reactions, or sometimes even what they choose not to do. And finally, L, their looks. Yes, I know we always say don't judge a book by its cover, but it can give us potential information about a character that we can kind of just put in with everything else to come up with information and an understanding of the character. For example, are they dressed really nice, but their actions are that they put off eating food so that they can buy the fancy clothes? That tells us something about them and what's important to them. Okay, so now that hopefully you have written these down in your notes, hint, hint, and if you have not, pause the video and do that. Okay, let's actually take a look at fear and an example of how to use this to understand a character. So our example is Frankie, our bully. As you can see here, I have broken down some examples for each one and telling me and explaining what it tells me. Like for speech, he speaks both English and Spanish, uses rough foul language to everybody, and lies. So this tells me that he's bilingual and also that he probably has different traditions than somebody who's not bilingual, might have. That he's very disrespectful, but the fact that he's lying to look better tells me he wants to be seen and understood differently. So it's showing me some complexity with him. T, yes, I know, we don't actually get to see inside Frankie's mind. We do get to see Gary's thoughts. We don't know Frankie's thoughts. So we are kind of assuming and using implicit information to guess what he might be thinking, such as Gary saying, it looks like he's trying to figure out where to hit me. That is probably Frankie thinking, should I not hit him? And we do see Frankie's emotions clearly displayed, which can kind of tell us how he's thinking. Which tells me he's very conflicted. He wants to do one thing, but he seems to have trouble controlling those impulses, and that he struggles with making a lot of choices. We're going to jump to his effect on others. He has a very strong effect on others. Kids stay away from him, run away from him. Teachers react to him. Adults react. Other adults seem to react to him. But at the same time, even though people don't like his actions, he has this other effect of people feeling sorry and being ashamed at not liking him. So yes, he's intimidated, but he's complicated. And it also tells us that since people are conflicted about him, that there's a lot going on in there and that he is a complicated kid that could go either way depending on the various choices he makes. But we can see the kind of choices he makes in his actions, where he stands up to teachers. He's known for hitting and bullying. We see that as he grows older, that he accidentally drowns his brother. He ends up in jail for attacking somebody. So we can see the kind of choices and actions he takes. But in this story, there's an action he does not take that's also very important. The fact that he does not hit Gary, the fact that he breaks a pattern momentarily in this situation, tells me overall he's violent and he doesn't know how to communicate his feelings and things like that, doesn't make good choices. He's not in control of his emotions. But based on this not hitting of Gary, he wants to do better. And there are times where we see him trying to be a different person. He is a conflicted kid who's trying to figure out who he really wants to be. And finally, we have his looks. His clothing is in bad shape. He looks like he's not well taken care of physically, like seems to have issues with his teeth and things like that. And we can see that he wears his emotions and his anger on his expressions. This tells me he does not have a good home life, because even if he doesn't have a lot of money and can't have nice things, you can still make sure you're brushing your teeth or things like that to still look presentable. So somewhere along the line, there's somebody not caring. He's not getting taken care of, and that he's uncomfortable, and that he is, again, that word impulsive coming up, because you can see the emotion and he reacts to it. So overall, we put all this together, and I keep coming back to the same ideas, that Frankie is a conflicted kid who has a really tough home life and not a lot of people caring about him, and that he wants to be better, he wants to be seen well, but he doesn't know how to get to that point. And his impulsive nature keeps getting him into these difficult situations that he ends up in jail for and not being able to, move on with his life. So he's clearly a complex character, because we do see all these different things about him and see multiple emotions that people are even conflicted on how to react to him. But I would argue that he is a static character. He starts off a bully, he ends up a bully. Even though he has this momentary thing where he seems to act differently, I would say this is just him struggling with wanting to change, but not actually changing. Because even when he gets down, he still threatens Gary. He still has that bully bravado. So we looked at his speech, thoughts, his effect on others, his actions, and his looks to really get a good sense of who Frankie is, and really decide, is he static or is he dynamic? And then we can learn lessons from him. The fact that he is static and does not change and ends up with so many problems teaches us that how we act and react and being in control of ourselves can make a difference based on how we make our choices. It can also show us that if other people had been able to help him, then the situation might have been changed and actually lead us to a variety of different themes in the story.